as we all know, after the All-Star break, the Chicago Bulls finally decided to go ahead and embrace the tank. It's been evident in what they've done on the court. We'll talk a little bit about that and why. This is AK finally admitting where he went wrong. Now, the question is he actually going to get it right this time, which story for another day. But even throughout that and in their trade deadline moves, the Chicago Bulls may have found themselves a keeper in Collin Sexton. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And Josh Giddey makes a comparison between this current Chicago Bulls and the early OKC Thunder team that he was on. We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content today, y'all. And man, hey, when you look at the Chicago Bulls record against some of these teams that have been tanking all season long, it just makes you kind of even more aware of the fact that the Bulls may have been trying to win for the entirety of the year, but when you look at some of these records against some of these bad teams, it really makes you think about, like, why, all right? Like why in that case? Like, it is what it is. Like, the Bulls are at a place now where you guys know. Like, I mean, they're clearly taking and prioritizing draft position in a deep draft, and even with that said, they may still end up just with the 9th overall pick. Maybe they can get up to 8th. Giving up to 7th, seems like not the most likely scenario in that. Maybe they can get up to 8th, though. And then they're going to be hoping for lottery luck. When you look at some of the Bulls' records against some of these teams that have been tanking all season long, right? They're 0-3 against the Pacers. They're 1-3 against the Nets. They're 1-1 against the Utah Jazz and the Sacramento Kings. Then they have one win against the Washington Wizards, with 2 games coming up against them towards the end of the season as well, right? And this is what it goes down to when I've said this before. I talk a lot about Billy Donovan and his coaching. Now, I realize that there have been some very imbalanced rosters, right? And you guys know I'm not somebody who I feel like you have to say all something is blamed on one person. You can actually, we live in a world where 2 things can be true, right? Billy Donovan, even what people refer to as Billy Ball, right? Talking about the guards, you got to look at this team and say, well, they've been stocked the most at the guard. Like, yeah, he plays the best players. Like, we have not had a lot of big man depth. Now, there have been some times where I do wish you would have trusted the big man a little bit more, right? Like, you look at Jalen Smith last year versus Jalen Smith this year. Had he been trusted a little bit more, now it was more difficult to play him as a 4 last season because for the majority of the year we didn't have Zach Collins. And then once Zach Collins came, we ran into some injury issues eventually with him and stuff like that. And Nikola Vucevic wasn't healthy at some point. But this season, we found it. Jalen Smith is better at the 4. He's much better at the 4, and that's perfectly fine, right? And now, running a more traditional lineup. Sometimes we've seen Modest at the 3, Jalen at the 4. When we had Vooch at the 5, now, we're back to not having traditional big man depth. We play Yabusele as a center. He's 6'6", 6'7". You got Nick Richards at 6'10". So, and then Jalen has been hurt some as well. But when you look at it, over Billy Donovan's career, the Bulls have fought pretty hard against playoff teams. They fought pretty hard against playoff teams. I want to be clear in that. Solid, right? But when you look at the number of teams that they lose to that should have been worse off than the Bulls, or teams that we knew were going to be bad coming into the season, that's another thing that's come in there, right? And so that's a weird delineation between the two. The Bulls have fought playoff teams pretty good. Teams below 500, the Bulls have actually not done. You remember there was a while there in the season where we actually had a winning record against winning teams and a losing record against losing teams. And that just goes back to the thing that I like to point out too with Billy Donovan. Like, I just don't understand the confidence in Billy Donovan, right? It is what it is there, though, I guess. But the Bulls so far on the season are 17-21 against above 500 teams and 9-17 against below 500 teams. That's crazy. That's just crazy when you look at it, when it all comes down to it. The Bulls are 4-8 right now against teams with 20 or less wins, right? That's crazy as far as when you look at that. And that just goes back to the standard that's being set as far as the coaching. Do I think Billy Donovan is the only thing wrong with the Bulls? No. But Billy Donovan is part of the problem here. And I think that the coaching standard that we have, for as long as that continues to be set where it is, it's going to be disappointing continually, right? Like, it is what it is. It is what it is. I don't know what else to say against it other than that. I know a lot of people have made a lot about the Bulls losing to the Kings, and it's like, okay, welcome to tanking. You're going to lose against teams that are worse than you. It is what it is. Clearly, in sitting Collin Sexton throughout the fourth quarter of that game as well. But this is more so the Bulls. I take the Bulls switching gears here. A team that's been trying to win every year and has gotten worse by the win record every year except last year where they stayed the same the year prior to that. This year, we're going to have another fewer wins than what we had the year before. Why is it that there's such a locked-in nature with Billy Donovan? And that is going to ultimately be the undoing of this front office. And, for those that want to see them get the fuck up out of there, cool. I will not be surprised if their loyalty to Billy Donovan is eventually, like, even with this reset. Let's say that you got the modest pick was right. We hope that the Noah Essengate pick is going to be right, and he's going to turn into himself to a decent player. Hopefully you get it right with this top 10 pick. You better goddamn well get it right. But if you don't have the right coach there, it's always going to end in the same thing. Now, Billy is a coach that has gotten, teams to win before. He's gotten teams to win, more than what they were expected to win before. He did that. Look at the Chris Paul Thunder when everybody thought that team was going to pack it away. They ended up making the playoffs, right? So, like, there is something to be said that Billy Donovan can, when you have a really solidly built roster, Billy Donovan can get something out of them. But at this point, do you want to trust that? And I know I probably kill this point by going back to it a lot, but I just think, there are some people that don't realize how much coaching matters to players. There are some more casual fans that just think, oh, just put all the players to figure it out. No, coaching still matters. Coaching matters a whole lot in how things come together and get put together. And so the Bulls just don't have a coach that I feel like is going to get that done. He's had one above 50 winning season in his entirety of his career. That was his first year in the league with 55 wins. He's never gotten over 50 again. He had 49 in 2018-19 with the OKC Thunder, then 44 the year after that, and then, came to the Chicago Bulls where he had 31 wins, 46 wins, 40, 39, 39, and then wherever we finished this season, maybe around 30-ish wins, right? And that's been the motto of Billy Donovan. So when you look at this, the front office finally admitted their wrongs. They admitted that we can't do it with the roster with the pieces that we had here. We got to reset the deck, and we're going to reset the deck by adding a top 10 draft pick, focusing on that in a deep draft. That's good. That's good awareness, at least, right? Now, you got to get some things right in that. But one of the things I need this front office to also realize is the guy that's calling the shots, the guy that can't call a play out of a timeout on an inbounds to save his life. What the fuck did you call the timeout for? It's time for the Billy Donovan experiment in Chicago to go. It doesn't mean that he was the only problem in Chicago. It doesn't mean that there weren't some roster issues. But at the same time, you have to realize you don't have the guy that is going to get the most out of a roster. You just don't have that. He's not the guy that's gonna squeeze out a 10-level effort from an 8-level team. He's just not that type of coach. And so, the development is a question. The performance, even when you have a good team, is a question. Like, even go back to the team with the Chicago Bulls that won 46 games. There were times in that season where we saw where Billy Donovan got out-coached and didn't adjust. We saw it even then when the team was still healthy and the number one team in the East. Many people will remember that have been around. That's the real OGs. That was the first season I started this show. That I said it. In that show, I said, listen, if the Bulls keep doing X things, this win streak isn't going to continue. That was when the Bulls were in the midst of that whatever game winning streak that we had, that people were like, oh my God, Haize, how can you say anything negative? We're winning. It's like, because I'm watching basketball. And so it just goes back to this thing with Billy Donovan. I have my consistent concern that as long as Billy Donovan is the coach with the Chicago Bulls, we'll never fully see a version of this team where we feel very confident in the coaching in it. And that's just my opinion. So I hope that in one of the things that this front office is evaluating after they evaluated and decided to change directions is really take a look at, do you have the right guy calling the plays? Let me know that. But with that said, one of the things that has stood out about the Chicago Bulls is they got them one at the trade deadline. They got them more than one. I'll get into some more. Like, I know that initially when the Bulls did this trade, everybody was like, oh, they're not keeping any of these players. And when you look at the way that bird rights work and also the way of retaining a roster and building a bench, one or two of these guys are going to stay. One of the guys that has definitely earned his spot on this team going forward is Collin Sexton. He's earned a spot on the team going forward. Now, that doesn't mean he's gonna be here, but he has earned a spot, not even just through the on-the-court production, which we talked about. He's brought leadership to a team at a time where we didn't have it because the whole team had been traded, and then the veterans point guards were out in Trey Jones and Josh Giddey, right? And so when you look at the thing that when the Bulls did their trade deadline move, you would hope that a former 8th overall pick in Rob Dillingham would be the guy that you would get lucky on and that would stick. You would hope that that's going to be the case, right? His ability to take players off the dribble, his ability with his speed, all that type of stuff. My boy Sal and Justin over on Bulls on Tap, which you guys should definitely check out now that they've relaunched that show with Sal as the main host. But they had a episode in which they were like, Rob Dillingham has game-changing speed. And my response to that was, speed is only game-changing if it actually matters in the game. Right now, Rob Dillingham is a player that's very fast when running in an open gym, but he's not very fast on the court because that speed doesn't do anything for him, right? So you added Rob Dillingham, who was an 8th overall pick 2 years ago. You added Jaden Ivey, who was a 5th overall pick in 2022, recovering from an injury. But yet it's Collin Sexton, the 27-year-old veteran who has really emerged as a player that's a keeper. Now, Anthony Simons, for what it's worth, has put up great numbers as well, right? And I want to be clear on that. Anthony Simons has been exactly what you want Anthony Simons to be, but I think we all kind of know Anthony Simons is probably not long for the world for the Chicago Bulls, right? Collin Sexton was kind of the guy that was brought in and kind of was just like, all right, you brought in Collin Sexton. It is what it is. You got him back in the trade. It is what it is, right? But this is a guy that has been a rotation player, right? He's on his 3rd team in 2 years, and sometimes those players just want to find a home. And I don't know if that's going to end up being the Bulls with Collin Sexton, but I do think Collin has shown that he probably deserves to stay around. Keep in mind, Collin Sexton himself is a former 8th overall pick in 2018 draft. He's averaged over his career 18 points, 3.7 assists, and it seems like for some players, it's about the role that they have, finding that right role. And coming off the bench for the Bulls, and you have guards in Trey Jones and Josh Giddey that he can get you the ball and that he can focus on one of his best attributes, and that's scoring, I like. Now, for the Bulls fans to say, well, listen, we need more two-way players on this team. You're absolutely correct. And in no way am I saying that Collin Sexton will absolutely stick for the Chicago Bulls team long term, but I am saying that he's shown that if he does, it's up to them to build a construction around it. And I want to put this into perspective for you real quick, right? I want to put this in perspective. Since Collin Sexton joined the team in February 5th, he's the 2nd leading scorer with 16 points per game. He's 4th in minutes played at 301 minutes. He's 2nd in field goal attempts with 139. He's 3rd in three-point attempts with 67, where he's hit 38.8% of them. He's 3rd in the team in free throw attempts, shooting 81% from the free throw line as well. Collin Sexton has come in, and on a better team, no, he's not going to be taking that large of a role. But the fact of the matter is that you like to surround, especially when you go younger, you like to surround your young players, if you're going to have veterans on that team, with veterans who you just know that they're going to do their job, because then it creates more structure around the young players that you're developing. If you have somebody that you're like, all right, bet that's going to a guy that we know can score in isolation, that means that, hey, when the offense stalls a little bit, we got a guy that can go out there and buy us a bucket, right? That's what you want to look at as a team. They could potentially have one of those guys in Collin Sexton. And we'll see. I'm not saying that Sexton is some irreplaceable player, no. But I think when you look at it, right, when you look at how many of the Bulls' deadline deals have disappointed, Jaden Ivey doesn't look like he has any confidence in himself. Hopefully that changes. Anthony Simons, I can't say that he's been a disappointment. He's just not healthy right now. But again, we know he's probably not staying long term. Dillingham, a disappointment. Big time disappointment, right? Collin Sexton as a guard has stood out as one of the players that feels like he's doing exactly what you would expect and need him to do. And of the Bulls' deadline acquisitions, right? These are the only players that really look like they're worth even entertaining to keep, and it's situational based off what the Bulls do in other places first. Take care of other business first, then circle back around. Collin Sexton's, as we just talked about, as a bench scorer, Nick Richards as a decent backup big that can get you a double-double, and Yabu Sele, who looks like a solid two-way player. Those are the only 3 players. And look, what the Bulls acquired 6 or 7 players, but that look like players that could potentially work out. And I'll say this: you add them to Trey Jones, Jalen Smith, and Isaac Okoro, That's a decent bench in the NBA. Trey Jones, Isaac Okoro, Jalen Smith, Collin Sexton, Nick Richards, Yabusele. That's a decent bench. Now, if Leonard Miller continues to show himself as well, cool. Congrats, Bulls. You went out and got yourself some decent bench players. Now you got to go out there and find yourself some starters, right? Like, you got to go out and find the starting two next to Josh Giddey. You got to go out there and find your other starting forward next to Monas Buzelis. You got to go out there and find your starting center. That's 3 players, 3 starter-level players the Bulls need to find this offseason. Do I think they'll do it? No. Right? Can you find 2 of them? No. Can you find your starter? And Will Billy Donovan even played even a top 10 pick? I hope so with being younger. But can you find that starter in that? I didn't even mention Noah Essengay as part of that bench unit. So there you go, another one, right? Can you find that starter there on that wing? Can you find a center, right? If you can do 2 this offseason, you're off to a pretty good spot, right? Because then you have Josh Giddey, you have Modest, you have those guys. Let's see what the Bulls can go out there and do, man. That's all I can say in that one. But Collin Sexton, Yabusele and Nick Richards have shown themselves in their role to be decent for the Bulls. Now, Collin Sexton will probably be the most expensive there. Yabusele, we don't know if he even wants to stay in the States, but I wouldn't be mad if those players help fill out the Bulls bench. That just puts AK in a position where go out there and find some starters, which I'll just leave that there. All right. So with that said, though, I want to move into the last topic for today. I want to get into this quote from Josh Giddey. And I'm going to frame it in what it actually means, but I'm going to read it real quick. He says this: "When I was in Oklahoma, we went from the worst team in the league to the best team in 24 months. We did it pretty quickly. A lot of rebuilds don't necessarily happen that fast. Obviously, with people and personnel we had, it got speeded up pretty quickly." Now, why did he ask that? He was asked that asked a question from Joe Cowley of the Chicago Sun-Times, and he said that. Now, I'm not going to say that the Bulls are going to go from worst to first. I would never expect that. AK has so much that he has to show in his ability to run a competent program here before I'd ever be willing to say something like that. But I am saying this. When you get the right pieces, it starts taking off. The Detroit Pistons went from a 14-win team to a near playoff team to now they're the number 1 team in the East. Right? That's just where it can go. When you have the right pieces, but you know what? Detroit Pistons changed their coach. You know what the OKC Thunder did? They changed their coach. So I hate to go back to that, right? But I do think this is that when you look at the Bulls, if Modest continues to excel, if Noah Essengay actually turns into a player next season, if you get this pick right in the top 10, you add that to Josh Giddey, that's a 4-player young core that, can start going on the up and up. You have some key veterans already on this team that makes sense to keep long term. Jalen is a decent vet who's still young. Trey Jones is a decent vet who's still young. Isaac Okoro at least knows his role. He's going to be frustrating at times, right? And then, like I said, if you keep any of those guys and Nick Richards and Collin Sexton, you have some solidness around it. I already don't expect AK to have the palate and the appetite to be willing to withstand a multi-year tank job. I think the Bulls are going to be right back there trying to compete next season. And whether that's right or wrong, we'll end up seeing how that ends up shaking up. And hopefully, if it does, by the trade deadline again, look mixed up, the Bulls once again say, all right, bet. Like, okay, cool. But rebuilds don't necessarily take 3-4 years, right? It depends on hitting in the pieces that you have here and how much do the players that you already have can continue to grow and develop. That's the thing that you have to look at that one. But like I said, one of the things that also stands out about those teams, they changed the head coach, which, is something that right now that it doesn't seem like is on the Bulls table. But I do think even you want to stay in Chicago, right? With the Bears and their turnaround, that, what happened? They changed their head coach. And so you just got to be willing to make the right changes at the right time if you really want to get out of the depths that you are in. And that's the thing that I continue to have some questions and qualms about if this front office is really ready to do. That's why I say you got to have somebody that values winning by any means necessary, meaning that they are willing to put some friendships to the side when it comes down to making the right move to win basketball games. And that's something that we haven't seen from AK. We haven't seen from Eversley. We haven't seen from these guys yet. But I look around at the Detroit Pistons that went from a 17-win team to a 14-win team to a 44-win team last season, and this season they're on pace to win over 50 games. I want that with this team. And over the course of that I just talked about from the Detroit Pistons, guess what? They had 3 different head coaches over that time. You just got to, again, it all goes back to that for me. And maybe maybe people are going to say, Haize, you're harping too much on the head coach thing. And maybe I am. But when it comes down to it, for me personally, I look at this and I say to myself, what the hell has Billy Donovan done to deserve this? And I don't know what he's done to deserve that type of loyalty, but I've said it. Billy Donovan is going to be the head coach until he decides he no longer wants to coach the Chicago Bulls. And that's just the reality that we're in. But, to get back in Josh Giddey's comments, I'm glad that Josh Giddey looks around and that we know Josh Giddey's a great teammate. Look at how his OKC Thunder teammates still feel about him. He's a great teammate. We still need a leader on this team, though. And maybe Josh Giddey's going to develop into that. Maybe Modest is going to develop into that. We need that leader. And that's why, I'm not mad at the Caleb Wilson in the draft. I'm not mad at the EJ DeBonsa in the draft. I'm not mad at those guys at all in the draft. We just got to see what's going to come of it and see if they can get it done, man. But overall, I'll say this. The Bulls have a lot of work to do. And, Billy Donovan isn't Mike Dangholt. He's just not. He's not J.B. Bickerstaff. He's not those level of coaches, in my personal opinion. But the Bulls have some work that they need to do, and let's really see if they're willing to do the hard work this offseason. This offseason is going to be hugely telling on if they're really ready to do the work that's really going to be taken to get this shit on the right track. But that's going to do it for today's episode, y'all. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Hit that notification bell if you never want to miss an episode. But I want to hear from you guys in the comment section as well. Tell me how you feel about it, about this team. Do you think Collin Sexton could be a keeper? Do you think anybody else could be a keeper? Let me know what you guys think on that one down below. Make sure you guys are following us at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.